our friend Matt Mowers. He's been on the program before. He's founding member of the EU-US Forum, and he also served previously in the previous Trump administration. He joins us now. Matt, good to see you.
Great
I
to see you.
I don't mean to sound like myopic about it, but I really was not expecting Germany's elections to be anything like what they turned out. And with
Yeah.
conservatives, they're a conservative, I guess they're right leaning party taking power. It's just not
Yep.
something that I thought we would see because I mean, this is Angela Merkel territory. I mean, this is like the country that kind of kickstarted some of the illegal immigration crisis that we see throughout the EU. Talk to me about this.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. I mean, it started with Angela Merkel, who, was, I guess, could be broadly defined as center right based on Germany's, electorate in politics, but barely, right?
Right.
And it really continued under Schultz. And, the Socialist Democratic Party has been in power now for several years, and you've really seen illegal immigration skyrocket. You've seen censorship and shutting down of free speech. I mean, even 60 Minutes did a special just a few weeks ago about these, broad definitions of hate laws, where you've got, the government going after individuals who are just expressing an opinion that may be contrarian to someone else. And these environmental policies. And this is all, stemming off of a lot of their bonehead decisions from years ago when the U.S. Was pressuring them in the first Trump administration, when you had folks like Rick Grinnell, who were ambassador to Germany, telling them, hey, you should probably get off Chinese technology and you shouldn't be hooked onto Russian energy. And, Merkel kind of poo-pooed them at the time. And then, you saw that come home to roost in the last few years as well. And so it is incredible. I mean, you've now seen really a cratering of the left wing across Europe, and in its most recent iterative form is there in Germany. I mean, Schultz's party, and I think he's still sobbing right now, 24 hours later, really took a collapse. This is their worst performance, I believe, in over 100 years right now. And you have seen a growth in support for both the center right, which is the CDU, as well as the more conservative party, which is the AfD.
Yeah.
And a lot of this really got started. And really a lot of the genesis it was brewing there already. But then when you had Vice President Vance go to the Munich Security Conference just in the last couple of weeks and deliver this, really remarkable speech that he did, taking the Germans and really broadly this, European bureaucracy to task for shutting down free speech, for having terrible environmental policies that shut down, family farmers and really hamstring their ability to make smart energy policy decisions. All these different issues. You take them on immigration, illegal immigration, the skyrocketing crime you've seen. I mean, and it's right in the heart of Germany, right?
Yeah.
Right before their elections. It's remarkable to see the change from his speech, just within days ago to now the recent election results. It shows that there's really growing conservative thought in the European continent. Folks are fed up with the left wing that they've been seeing and the failure that they've seen in delivering their own lives. And they're finally willing to step up and speak out about it by casting their vote for a conservative party.
And you mentioned JD Vance's, Vice President Vance's speech over there. I kind of, I had to chuckle because they acted as though they were shocked that he said this. Like, did they expect anything else? I mean, everything was working together. It was like an ingredients list of fabulousness. Everything was coming together at the right time. How did they think that there was going to be any other kind of message delivered but the one that he delivered? It made me worry about what kind of leadership they were providing for their own constituents if they expected something else than what he said to them at that meeting.
Well, look, I was in the State Department, so I've had to go to a bunch of these international meetings. And I'll tell you, traditionally what happens is everyone shows up and they all have their coffee.
No one rocks the boat.
They move off to a lunch, and then they move off to a nice little conversation, a roundtable and bilateral meeting where it's a bunch of talking points where they say basically nothing except, we look forward to further economic and military cooperation, but no one knows what that really means.
Right.
And nothing really ever gets said. And so it's refreshing. And I get it. Maybe we have a little bit of an American bias where we actually like to, talk about real issues and do things instead of just, make noise and spout off a bunch of hot air about things. But what we saw was J.D. Vance really address the big elephant in the room, which is the fact that if we are going to continue to have this relationship between the United States and traditional Europe in the way that we've had for a long time now, and, often served both of us well, we got to start aligning our values on it. We can't just talk the talk and start talking about the latest weapons purchase and all that, which, by the way, they should also be doing. But Europe was behind the eight ball and all of that for, decades as well. But they've got to start getting serious about addressing the needs of their own people. And, it's amazing to me, you had all these bedwetters essentially sitting around saying, I can't believe he said these things. J.D. Vance clearly is in better touch with the constituents of Germany than their own current chancellor and Scholz was.
Yeah.
Because what we saw were voters vote the way J.D. Vance would have voted likely had he been a citizen of Europe, not the way Scholz would have. And so I think it's really telling that for all the hand-wringing from the, global bureaucracy that you kind of saw, present in Munich and everywhere else, and all the commentary after his speech, that he was the one who actually could identify the true underlying concerns of the European citizen in a way that, like the EU-US Forum's been talking about. I mean, Dan, you were with us at our kickoff event about a year ago now, and it's all the same issues we've been talking about now that we've seen across the continent. Unchecked migration leading to crime, and particularly in Germany.
Bad.
Particularly in Germany, you've seen statistics that show, nearly 1 in 50% of the violent crime committed by someone who's a migrant. I mean, this is the type of thing that eventually citizens are saying, this is impacting my life. The politicians are ignoring those concerns. It's time for a change. And that's what we saw in Germany this weekend.
Exactly. I remember the videos that they had to put out. And this was like maybe 10 years ago when they were doing like the song and dance, trying to instruct people that they were bringing over and housing like near German schools and all of this. Like, you can't just touch females without permission. And they had to do this whole choreographed thing. And it was a weird, and everybody talked about this weird viral video and how it was kind of amusing. But at the same time, it was sort of terrifying that they had to basically devolve down to that point to try to protect their own constituents. And there are videos out like every single week of people being assaulted, accosted. I think you had even, I think the EU-US Forum had even tweeted one out. We're talking with Matt Mowers, who worked in the previous Trump administration and also is with the EU-US Forum about all of this. Because Vance, he was talking about the threat from within, the threat against speech and the threat against rights. I mean, to say nothing of, the kicking and screaming that we've heard from a lot of these leaders, just in pain, just the bare minimum of GDP for their own defense per NATO, because now we have this. I feel like we're having more productive conversations on Ukraine now than we did, obviously, under the previous administration, with the exception of Keir Starmer, I will say. But that's sort of also shown the cracks in his party's decision and their decision making and their goals with Ukraine, as opposed to, now Germany's got to rethink all of this because now the conservatives are coming into power. Macron's, quickly losing popularity and seats. So all of this is shifting. What does that mean for the United States and how we're viewing this conflict? Is Europe actually going to stand up and say, no, we're going to take the lead on this for once and we're going to deal with this, and United States, you can back us if you want? Because it doesn't seem like they're going Starmer's route.
No, I don't. You're not going to be able to see them step up and lead. They're seemingly incapable of doing that. But what they are going to have to do is actually do something. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, with the exception of the fighting that's happened on the ground, right, which obviously has been well documented, from a diplomatic side, there's been essentially no movement since the start of that conflict.
Yeah, it is weird.
No one's engaging on either side. I mean, everyone's having the same meeting and everyone's having Zelensky over and everyone's going off to meet with them. But there's no actual progress towards a diplomatic solution on any of that. It's just a lot of the same conversation year after year after year. So what President Trump has now done by kind of reorienting and reshaping the conversation is actually at least forcing the Europeans, even if they're not going to want to do it exactly the way that we are, to at least recognize that something has to change. They have to find a new way for engagement, that they have to step up and actually invest in their own collective defense as well, which, by the way, is good for them. It's good for us. It's good for Western security.
Yeah.
If they do that. And so, by President Trump kind of really grabbing the bull by the horns and changing it up, he's forcing a conversation now. We've seen probably more movement diplomatically in the last 2 weeks than we've seen in the last 2 years as a result of what's happening. And that's a good thing. If we're closer to finding a way to get about a long-term peace agreement, that's good, right? That's why diplomats exist. That's why, you want to engage. And so, if we want a pathway to peace, which everyone claims they do, you ask the Europeans, that's what they say their goal is, but they haven't done anything until the last few weeks about actually trying to get there.
That's a really good point. They have the photo ops and they have Zelensky out and it's like the same pictures and the same conversations and nothing's changed, for some odd years. Now there's a lot of things changing. And I don't know, it just seems like the pieces of the puzzle are starting to fall into place, and maybe people are seeing reason. I don't know. I'm very optimistic. I'm more optimistic now, especially after these last elections in Germany, than I think I have been about a lot of our allies over there. So this isn't very encouraging.
Well, I'll say, Dana, the one challenge though still is this. So you've had now growth in votes for conservative parties across the board. We saw the same thing in the EU elections. We've seen the same thing in national elections. We saw the same thing in France last year. But there is now this conspiracy of the left and the center to try to box out conservative parties from actually taking any of the seats in government once they actually do better in the elections. Because of the parliamentary system, they're able to do that, right? I mean, our system, when we win, we get more seats, we get to call the shots.
Right.
Because of the parliamentary system there, it's not working that way. You're seeing conservatives boxed out. You're seeing the AfD boxed out right now by the CDU, even though they're the center-right party. They're going to partner with the left party right now instead of working with the AfD. We've got to get to the point where the politicians in Europe are actually respecting the will of the voters. The voters are stepping up and screaming as loud as they can that they want conservative change. The politicians need to start actually honoring the will of the voters and get serious about that.
I let you mention the CDU. There's a video where they're saying none of us wants to close the border. And then the voters spoke. Yeah, they do. They absolutely do. Matt Mowers with the EU-US Forum. Always a pleasure. I would look forward to talking with you again soon. You do such great work and raising awareness of what's happening because we need strong allies. I mean, that's incredibly important for us, for our strength as a nation, for our national security. So these are good moves, but we got a lot more to come. Matt Mowers, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.